Every year, this conference has an important impact on the Richmond community and on the Virginia community. People come away with a deeper understanding of the issues, an appreciation of the importance of the rule of law, and an understanding as to how it builds a better community and a more vibrant democracy when those ideals are encouraged. We live in a time in which it's easy to have our discourse be relegated to slogans and sound bites and personal attacks. And this is the kind of meeting where people are able to actually very thoughtfully engage one another, have serious discussions, listen to opposing points of view, and engage in the kind of discourse that makes our society healthier and that promises better solutions. When hate speech leads to hate crime, what does a decent society do?
Taking a personal stand to confront hate speech.
To be a visible proponent of non-hateful ideas.
Being better skilled and more courageous around confronting when we hear it in our own circles.
Hate has to be out in the open to fight it.
It starts with education, but not in a vacuum. The idea was posed that it needs to take place in the context that our children and our students understand the social media that they use today.
To actually teach as part of the curriculum the rules of civil discourse as well as conflict resolution, because if you can learn how to resolve your conflicts, then that may not lead to the next step, which could be hate speech and then violence.
When some of our communities do events to discuss important issues that are being debated in the public sphere, that we try to do it in a way that's more about the ideas and less about the sides in that debate.
Promote civility and consensus building.
We're supposed to try to educate and engage. It's not easy, is it?
Over the past few years, provocative speech about political and social issues has been expressed by civic leaders, politicians, media pundits, and ordinary people. Speech that conveys hate, causes hurt, and threatens violence is increasingly part of public discourse, especially through new media such as blogs or web videos. Inflammatory and divisive utterances in writing can make it very difficult to engage in productive discussion. This is especially true for deliberations over complex issues about which people hold legitimate differences of opinion. What concerns me most about public discourse is that we're losing our ability to deliberate complex issues from multiple perspectives. That kind of discussion, though difficult, is a cornerstone of democracy. The climate for speech of the current moment, where asserting one's viewpoint is all too often accompanied by ignoring, ridiculing, or advocating destruction of anyone who disagrees, doesn't leave much room for more nuanced deliberations and doesn't convey the value of such speech. It is hard to deny that the people targeted through such speech experience emotional pain. Psychological studies and individual stories establish that being confronted with this kind of language under certain circumstances can make people fearful, angry, withdrawn, less productive. To the extent that a person feels threat as well as insulted and stereotyped, they can become less confident about participating in public discourse. Some react to the feeling of harm by lashing out at others. Division and distrust within and between communities can result when such language is common. Having survived a violent attack emerging out of hate, I'm under no illusion that the differences between the US government and Al-Qaeda would be resolved by sitting down to talk. But as we discuss trials and alternative responses to acts of terror, we need to be able to hear one another and to be heard and not be afraid.
The internet has thrown a whole new wrench into the discussion of free speech and hate speech and the like, especially with the terrorism field and some of these more disturbing sites that talk about, fatwas that are okaying death of American soldiers. And so it brings to light and brings into prominence the famous quote by Justice Jackson in the 1949 case when he said, in a dissenting opinion, when he said that the Constitution is not a suicide pact. And it gives pause to how we approach, especially with the internet, because, again, the video about what to do about insulting the Prophet of Islam is one of those things that inspired people like Jihad Jane and others.
The Simon Wiesenthal Center has been looking at these communications for many years and seen the progression from the early stages of the internet and early websites to discussion forums, and now with Facebook and MySpace and the like. I think that we need to go back and look at these things and get the internet providers to say, I don't need this hate on my system. I have hundreds of thousands of websites, and why do I have to have this? Some of the social networking sites have already done that. They take many offensive sites out. But we need to get to a point where the internet community itself says, I don't like this on my internet. The internet has so many good features. Why do we need garbage like this on it?
Here in the Holocaust Museum, on a day in which we are invited to reflect on the rule of law, without experiencing, as I'm sure you did, the very, very powerful tensions and contradictions in all of those symbols coming together. We have to remember that the Holocaust didn't just happen. People didn't just wake up one morning in Germany and load millions of people into train cars and then exterminate them. The Holocaust was one of the most powerful examples in world history of hate speech leading to hate atrocities. Would you agree with me that the prelude to the violence was hate speech? That you could go back and reverse engineer, and in almost every murder, every assassination, every bombing, every genocide campaign, finding in the antecedent time period hate speech that contributed to it or caused it in some sense. In the social and cultural arena, for me, I feel virtually no restraint in the aggressive, vigorous condemnation of hate speech. Although there may be tactical judgments as to how one is most effective, there's for me no moral ambiguity as to both my right and my duty to rail against hate speech and to use my abilities in print and in other public forums to condemn it when it manifests itself. To use either criminal prosecution or our tort law, civil liability, or the equivalents, things like the Fair Housing Act, for example, to either financially penalize or incarcerate those who engage in hate speech. Well, this conference involves people who are already very much committed to building a better community, a community that has respect for the rule of law, but is also deeply interested in issues of racial tolerance and respect, religious tolerance and respect, and eliminating the kinds of virulent and hateful speech that damage our community.